All right, so I'm now back inside of our 516 Grasslands map, and I have all my light on here. I've sort of framed this up in sort of a aesthetically pleasing frame here, showing most of the elements in our scene. And what I want to talk about now is the difference. As you can see, all of our lights here are set to movable, so they're dynamic, which means that whenever I change anything in the scene, let's say I want to shift this plateau up a little bit, or I want to remove it completely, or I'd like to adjust the orientation of this bird. Anytime I do anything like that, I'm not going to get that dreaded lighting needs to be rebuilt sign up here because I'm not using static lighting. So let's talk about that for a second. So what's the difference? The number one difference is while you're working inside of your real-time workflow, your life is going to be made a lot easier if you switch everything to movable light. Because essentially that means you're going to get a good idea of what you see in regards to what you're going to get in real time on the fly. There's going to be no slowdowns, no lighting needs to be rebuilt up here. If all of your lights are switched to movable, you're not going to have any of those issues. Now, what are the benefits to this sort of trade-off? Because there are some pros, there's a lot of pros, and then there's also a lot of cons. So the number one pro is there's no render or build phase. All right, anytime I decide to move around, check something out, maybe shift this rock up here, rotate it, move it back down. Let's duplicate this rock, bring it out, adjust it, etc., etc. Anytime I want to make any sort of change like this, I don't have to do anything with my lighting. It's already sort of built in dynamically. There is no need to bake any sort of light map or anything like that. Even if I wanted to move this mountain way over here in the background, if I wanted to lower the whole thing, it's not going to be a problem. In fact, that might even be better for the shot so I can see the silhouette of this little bird a little bit more clear. No lighting needs to be rebuilt. We're good. I can even jump into my sequence here. Let's go into my sequence for this. Okay. Under sequence, I have my Grasslands master sequence. If I look through here, nothing's changing. I haven't had to rebuild one single thing. Now, the disadvantage here that you're going to see, and this is very, very important for you to think of because you're going to have to sort of really gauge this, is you are not going to get bounced light from anything in your scene. So the light will hit the surfaces, but it will not bounce back. So, you know, it's essentially all this direct lighting sort of stops at the impact point. You're not going to have bounce or diffuse fill. You're also not going to be able to utilize global illumination in the scene, which once again is a gathering of all that light and the ability for it to diffuse globally, illuminating the scene inside of those little nooks and crannies and crevices. Like that's not going to happen. All right. And those are things that some people are very concerned about in regards to their level of quality. The other trade-off you're going to find too is your shadows are going to be of a much lower quality. And that's because all of this is working dynamically on the fly. So it's not baking in any of the shadows in a much more accurate way. So for this film specifically, so let's go back to the main level here. So under maps, I have my master edit level. Everything that I have here, and let me go ahead and open my cinematic master edit. This entire film is movable light. There is not one single static or stationary light in this entire project. And I personally feel good with the quality that I'm achieving here. Now, if there are reasons to where you would want to change this and go into static light, let's take a look at this scene again. Once again, because of our master workflow here, this is great. I can just jump into these shots. You know, everything that's represented in here will be in my folders that I've organized here. I can go into my lights folder and I can start changing things. So let's take a look at the before and after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of these. I'm going to change everything to static. All right. And I'm going to actually build the light and we're going to take a look at the difference. And I think you're going to be pretty shocked. All right, now we're back, and as you can see, our frame looks pretty different. This is not what we were used to when we were doing our real-time workflow, moving around, changing shots up. Go back in here, sort of unpilot the camera here and sort of move around. Now you can see things like our shadows definitely are a lot more accurate. All right, but our overall look for this scene has changed pretty dramatically. All right. So one thing that's interesting though is you'll notice that, even though I had all my lights set before, if I'm working in a real-time iterative workflow, putting everything in as movable lights, I then have to do an entirely new pass where I go in and I start changing things to sort of bring it back to where I wanted. And I'll have to rebuild after these changes to commit pretty much anything that I want to do here. Now, once again, this is going to be up to you. This is 100% up to you in regards to how you would like to treat this. If you set things as stationary, right, you're going to have to do this the same way. For me, I've made the decision just up front that I wanted to work in movable light the entire time for this project. But if you would like to work and bake your lights, put all of that information in a more concrete rendered pipeline, you can totally do that. It in some cases though is going to limit the rapid creative iteration that you can have using a completely movable workflow. But this serves just as a very base, like I said, a very base level example of the differences, because all the lights are in the exact same spot. I'm just going to have to go in and do a little bit more work now. It's not redoing work by any means, but I'm going to have to go in and do a little bit more work to get my lights, to get the overall art direction and the look back to where it was before. Albeit, once again, the pros of this method with higher accuracy for the shadows, global illumination, and the ability to have a bounced light. But as far as I'm concerned, like I said, for my version of the short, I don't really need any of this. So let's go back to how that looked with everything set to movable. All right, so here we are back again. Once again, everything is set to movable. I've tweaked it, I've adjusted it to my heart's content, and I'm feeling really good with how this looks. So like I said, to build or not to build, it's really up to your own personal preference, the workflows you're using, the type of detail that you're also expecting in your lighting. I think I get away with having the movable lights here because this is a lot more stylized, and even though it's got a photo quality to it, it still doesn't feel quite 100% photographic. So I think I get away with the stylization here than I would if I was doing something that was expected to be 100% photographic. So the choice is in your hands. It's a lot more than just selecting the options here and adjusting things from movable to static or stationary. You're really going to have to sort of dig deep into those options, learn a little bit more about the lighting and what those properties mean and how they all sort of work together. But if you want to do the movable, set it there from the outset. The moment you start creating, make sure everything is set to movable, and you'll have, once again, a what you see is what you get version of building as you're creating your scene.